Chatham House has produced a survey of the information and cyber war that's been taking place as part of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. It's looked at the lessons learned from the campaigns that have been observable during that conflict, and it's also drawing from them ideas that should inform future defenses against Russian operations. One of the most striking features of the early Russian information and cyber campaign against Ukraine was the way in which it was not innovative. Russia reused methods that had been tried and tested before in terms of information and influence, and so, naturally, Ukraine was ready for them. The disinformation attempts fell flat because they were exploiting narratives that were dreamt up by Russian propagandists without any reference to the real lived experience of Ukrainians. In a way, Ukraine was in the sweet spot in terms of resisting Russia's information campaigns, not only building on the experience of observing them over the long term, not only making use of foreign support, but also enjoying the support of the tech platforms. Right from the very beginning, the tech platforms showed which side they were supporting, and as a result, the entire information environment within Ukraine was hostile to Russian operations. But other countries should not rely on this being the same when it comes to future confrontations with Russia. In the case of Ukraine, it's extremely clear-cut where these companies' loyalties lie, and they made a choice to support democracy against an aggressor. There may be other situations where responsibilities to directors, to boards, to shareholders mean that commercial interests do not lie so clearly on the side of defense. Russia's campaigns of subversion against Ukraine exploited some of the same methods of attack that we've seen them use against Western societies across the Euro-Atlantic community. It's ways of setting people against each other. It's exploiting wedge issues. It's looking at where those divisions in society lie and exacerbating them. It's different topics across different countries because Russia has looked closely at its target audiences and decided which is going to be the most effective line of attack. In the United States, it's guns and race. Across Europe, it's migration. In the UK, still, where those buttons are available to be pressed, it's Brexit. In each case, Russia doesn't invent the issue that it's exploiting, but it exacerbates the problem. It fans the flames. It sets people against each other because that is the way in which you erode social resilience and you erode the capacity of a country to withstand the eventual attack. Many countries recognize the scale of the information challenge and the way in which Russia exploits disinformation, misinformation, subversion to attack them. But there are very few countries that have seized the problem in quite the way Ukraine has under existential threat. Ukraine moved to close off the channels of information and influence that Russia was using to subvert its society, more or less at the time of the full-scale invasion in February 2022. Other countries have not felt the threat so closely yet, and so have not taken the same measures. Russia's plan for Ukraine depended on having subverted the country beforehand. Russia assumed, believing its own propaganda, that Ukrainians would welcome Russian troops and that the operation that Russia had prepared would be a swift decapitation. The country would fall swiftly into their hands. This was entirely wrong, partly because of Russia's own institutional pathologies and not being able to understand precisely what they were dealing with when invading a sovereign country with a strong national identity instead of the province of Russia that they imagined. But much more so, Ukraine had developed its own resilience and its own defenses and its own strength against the information and cyber campaigns that we've seen over the preceding 8 years of war. With a great deal of foreign support from countries like the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ukraine had developed its defenses against the campaigns from Russia that it observed, both in technical cyber terms and in the information operations. And as a result, they were far better positioned in February 2022 than many people assumed. In a way, it's a parallel to how people looked at the Ukrainian military and its condition in 2014 and assumed that the same would be the case in 2022 and were surprised at the capacity Ukraine showed for resistance. So in the information domain, this was an entirely different country than that which was taken by surprise in 2014. This also took Russia by surprise. The extent to which their campaigns to divide Ukrainian society, to erode trust in institutions and in government, to set Ukrainians against themselves and to push the narratives of Russian domination failed utterly. And, of course, this led to Russia's overall campaign plan also failing utterly. The result has been both a blessing and a tragedy for Ukraine. A blessing because the country survives, A tragedy because Russia has had to pivot from its initial plan of a decapitation strike to this long, grinding war of attrition and attempts at genocide and eradication of Ukrainian nation.